Hello, my name is Reverend Dr. May Elise Cannon. Today is Thursday, February 22nd. This is the 139th day since October 7th. According to Reuters, Israeli bombs on Rafah flattened a mosque and destroyed homes in what residents called one of their worst nights yet. While the Hamas chief has been in Cairo for talks, Gazans hope that a truce could be on the horizon in time to head off a full-blown assault on the city. So that was a direct quote from Reuters. Gazan health authorities said that 97 people were killed and 130 wounded in the last 24 hours of Israeli assaults. So Rafah is being assaulted, but there is not yet a full-on ground invasion. We're paying close attention to see and to ensure, to do our best to try to prevent an ongoing ground invasion, a full invasion. But there are significant concerns because, of course, Rafah is the most populated city in southern Gaza. So there are ongoing discussions about a hostage deal, but there's been no significant movement in that regard. We do know Ismail Haniyeh, the political chief of Hamas, did arrive in Cairo this week for his first publicly announced visit since December. Haniyeh has met with Egyptian mediators. Not much has been said in public as of yet. But we do know a leading member of Hamas, Musa Abu Marzouk, said that he believes a new hostage agreement is possible and that there could be breakthrough negotiations in the near future. That was in an interview he gave today to an Arab broadcaster. The end of the Israeli military operation in the Gaza Strip and the return of internally displaced people to the north are conditions for such a deal, according to that Hamas official, which is not inconsistent with what we've been hearing so far. He also called for a release of 500 additional Palestinian political prisoners in exchange for the release of the hostages. It's believed that there still are about 100 hostages being held in Gaza, with hopes that that many might still be alive. Abu Marzouk also said Hamas does not see it as a must that they govern the Gaza Strip itself in the future, but that it could be under a competent Palestinian government, and Hamas members have already met representatives of other Palestinian organizations. However, Hamas would not leave the Gaza Strip and would continue its fight, he added. So that's news in terms of the potential of a hostage agreement. It's also been in the news that there was an injured man in Gaza who said that Israeli troops beat him. There have been quite a few allegations of mistreatment. This was reported also in Reuters. He is being treated at a Gaza hospital, has severe bruisings on his face, cuts on his fingers, and other injuries, saying Israeli soldiers beat him with chunks of masonry and chairs after bursting into his home on February 20th. The account by Ramadan Shamlak, who's 22 years old, could not be verified from another source, but this is the latest in allegations of mistreatment by Palestinians by Israeli forces since the war in Gaza began. Another one of the major sparks that many have been paying close attention to as a possible turning point in terms of the war between Israel and Hamas is what's going on in the West Bank, and if the West Bank is going to bubble over or explode. And there have been consistent concerns about this and about escalations in the West Bank. And in the last day, there was an attack on an East Jerusalem actually on a West Bank settlement of Ma'adumim. One Israeli, Matan El-Maliak, 26-year-old, was killed and 10 additional Israelis were wounded. This was a shooting attack near Ma'adumim, the West Bank settlement near Jerusalem. Two of the three perpetrators were shot and killed, and a third was wounded. We also know that in the last 24 hours, the Israeli Defense Forces and Border Police arrested 17 people in the West Bank overnight, while also confiscating weapons, according to the Israeli Defense Forces. The U.S. envoy McGurk is in Israel, and he has been told that the Israeli government continues its intention to move forward with a full-on ground invasion into Rafah. And so McGurk is spearheading the hostage negotiations for the U.S. He's currently visiting Israel. Israel's defense minister communicated that the Israeli government will expand the authority given to our hostage negotiators, while at the same time preparing the continuation of an intense ground operation. Gallant stressed the importance of dismantling remaining Hamas battalions in central and southern Gaza, and that was a significant part of their conversation. McGurk's visit comes amid steady U.S. pressure not to conduct a major operation in Rafah until the more than Palestinians that have been displaced there are able to be accounted for. That's a little bit different than the hearing a plan for a plan for them to be moved. U.S. officials are further concerned that a failure to achieve a deal by Ramadan, which is only 3 weeks away, combined with other looming factors, which includes, the far right Israeli government, the rise of Jewish nationalism, that could lead to a greater regional spillover. There have been more deaths at the Israel-Lebanon border. Reports in Lebanon say that 4 people were killed and several others were wounded in an Israeli-attributed drone strike. And Houthis have said that they will ban all American and British-owned ships from crossing through the Red Sea. The U.S. Central Command said that U.S. aircraft and coalition warships shot down 6 Iranian-backed Houthi drones in the last day, and the Houthis later fired on 2 anti-ship ballistic missiles from southern Yemen into the Gulf of Aden. We also know that Israel's aero defense system intercepted an inbound missile over the Red Sea hours after the U.S. military had said it had targeted Houthi sites in Yemen. The UK has expressed that they are considering suspending arms export licenses to Israel if the Israeli Defense Forces do raid Rafah. And the Turkish foreign minister has called on the international community to take a more active role in urging a ceasefire in Gaza and in pursuing a 2-state solution. This was during talks at the G20 meeting in Brazil. China has demanded that the World Court also speak out on the Israeli occupation. You're familiar that the ICJ has been meeting this week to determine the illegality of the occupation. It's worth noting that some of the survivors of the Nova Music Festival attacks from October 7th are suing the Associated Press for aiding and abetting Hamas on October 7th. Apparently, there was a photographer who was embedded with Hamas who has sold pictures to the Associated Press. The New York Times is also listed in this article. And this is according to a story that was published by the New York Post yesterday. I got this news, I believe, from Haaretz. The plaintiffs who are being represented by lawyers are working with a nonprofit National Jewish Advocacy Center. They're suing the AP for damages under the Anti-Terrorism Act. And according to the federal complaint that was filed Wednesday night, the suit mentions 4 freelance photographers by name whose work was purchased and published. It claims that they were known Hamas associates embedded with the Hamas terrorists during the October 7th attacks. And one of the photojournalists, Hassan S. Laia, had some of the most comprehensive images that were used from the scenes of the attacks on October 7th. And he had admitted going back into Gaza with Hamas, but denied having any advanced knowledge of the attacks. So I wanted to be sure to let you know about that news. I talked about Doctors Without Borders yesterday, and they reported through OSHA's daily update today, condemning a strike on a house in Al-Mawasa area in Khan Yunis, where 64 people, including staff from Doctors Without Borders and their families, were sheltering. They said the amount of force being used in densely populated urban environments is staggering, and targeting a building, knowing that it is full of humanitarian workers and their families, is unconscionable. The attack resulted in the killing of 2 family members of Médecins Sans Frontières, that's the French name for Doctors Without Borders. 6 others were injured. According to MSF, the site's location had been notified to the Israeli forces. A flag was hung above the building. There were no evacuation orders. And in response to the incident, the UN Undersecretary of Humanitarian Affairs and the Emergency Relief Coordinator, Martin Griffiths of the UN, said humanitarians are putting their lives on the line, and like all civilians, they must be protected. I wanted to close today by reading a Facebook post. I was just introduced to the work of an American humanitarian activist, a blogger named Ahmad Fouad Al-Khatib. He is an American activist, a blogger. He's the founder and executive director of a group called the Project for Unified Assistance. He's working towards the establishment of a humanitarian airport in the Gaza Strip to be run and operated by the UN. And this is what he wrote about Gaza. He said, civilians in northern Gaza who are experiencing famine-level starvation have been for over 2 days protesting against Hamas, blaming the group for their misery and suffering and calling out Ya'a Sinwar and Ismail Hananiah. Hamas units repeatedly shot at those hungry people who are marching in Jabalia with empty pots and plates to intimidate and to disperse them. Additionally, the group launched attacks against Israel's ground units today in Zaytun in southern Gaza City. It published propaganda videos of the attacks and IDF helicopters evacuating casualties to re-energize, quote, spirits of resistance. Hamas is also hoping to draw IDF ground units back into Gaza and to weaken potential protests and to ensure that the IDF allocates resources in the north instead of amassing troops for an offensive against Rafah in the south. Some sources suggest Hamas has reorganized remnants of its decimated battalions in the north and is once again trying to maintain a cohesive presence that could threaten the Israeli military and engage in long-term insurgency while ensuring continued control of the population. Hamas is counting on famine and widespread hunger to create political pressure on Israel and to ensure that Gazans are too weak to challenge the group's authority. That's why it's crucial to get large quantities of food to the north as soon as possible so that people don't starve. It's vital to foil Hamas's designs to hide behind widespread famine, which is inevitable at this point, in large part due to Israel's blocking of food supplies going into the besieged city. Nevertheless, it's shameful that the World Food Program halted deliveries of food to the north at a time when the need is the greatest. So these updates, that was from a Facebook post, again, from an American activist, Ahmad Fuad Al-Khatib. I think these posts and the realities of what's happening in Gaza, the desperate need and hunger in the north, the desperate needs for water, medical supplies throughout the whole Gaza Strip, these all the more are reasons for us to support a comprehensive ceasefire, the laying down of arms by all parties. Yesterday, the Pilgrimage for Peace, the Gaza ceasefire pilgrimage that was traveling from Philadelphia to DC, arrived in Washington. And there was an event in Lafayette Square with speakers. And I hope you're able to read the news reports about that. Kyle Christopholo from Churches for Middle East Peace spoke. I hope you might even be able to see that on video. And our call is a call for this, a desperate need for a comprehensive ceasefire to stop the massive number of deaths in Gaza, to stop the ongoing killing of anyone, the killing in settlements, the killing in Rafah, the killing throughout the Gaza Strip. The end of killing should be a top priority, calling for a comprehensive ceasefire. Immediate and adequate humanitarian assistance into Gaza is our second call. The release of hostages, of which there are believed to be about 100 left alive in Gaza in exchange for political prisoners. And finally, that the core causes of the conflict, the ongoing occupation of the Palestinian people that's being discussed in the ICJ this week, that the core causes would be addressed, the legitimate security needs of Israelis, the self-determination and freedom of Palestinians. All these are reasons for us to continue our work towards a comprehensive ceasefire.